The dying signal, Doctor. Xylex's four eyes focused on the strange signal coming through the communication array. The tall, thin alien adjusted his position at the monitoring station, his blue skin growing pale as he read the incoming transmission. Around him, the research station hummed with its usual quiet activity. Other crew members moved through the corridors, going about their daily tasks without knowing that everything was about to change. The Cathari research station floated in the empty space around Velthara, a massive gas giant with swirling purple clouds. For 5 years, the station had been studying the planet's strange energy patterns. It was peaceful work, the kind that Xilex enjoyed. No wars, no politics, just science and discovery. But the signal on his screen was not peaceful. Help. Anyone. This is New Haven Colony. The voice crackled through layers of static. We are under attack. Massive ships. They came from nowhere. Xilex felt his heart beating faster. New Haven Colony was a human settlement 3-star systems away. The humans were known throughout the galaxy as Deathworlders, beings from a planet so dangerous that it had made them into the most feared warriors in space. If something was attacking them, it had to be serious. The transmission continued, growing weaker. Hundreds of ships. They're taking our people, destroying everything. Please, someone help us. Then silence. Xilex stared at the screen for a long moment. He had studied humans for years, reading their history and learning about their culture. Most aliens feared them, calling them violent and unpredictable, but Xilex saw something different. He saw a species that protected others, that fought against cruelty and injustice. He pressed the recording button and saved the transmission. Then he stood up and walked quickly toward the command center. His long legs carried him through the curved hallways of the station. Other crew members nodded at him as he passed, but he barely noticed them. Commander Vextor was in his usual place on the bridge, looking out at the gas giant through the large viewing window. The commander was older than Xilex, his blue skin marked with the silver lines that showed his age and experience. He had led the research station for 15 years, and he valued peace above everything else. Commander, Xilex said, approaching carefully, I have received a distress signal. Vextor turned around, his expression curious. From whom? The human colony at New Haven. They are under attack by unknown forces. The commander's expression changed immediately. His eyes narrowed and he stood up straight. Show me. Xilex played the recording. As the desperate human voice filled the bridge, other crew members stopped their work and listened. The fear in the transmission was clear, even through the static and interference. When it ended, Vextor was quiet for a long time. He walked to his command chair and sat down heavily. This is not our concern, he said finally. We are scientists, not soldiers. The humans have their own military to protect them. But Commander, Xilex said, the nearest human military base is 2 weeks away. These people will be dead long before help arrives. That is unfortunate, but we cannot help them. We have no weapons, no military training. What could we do? Xilex had expected this response. The Cathari were a peaceful people who avoided conflict whenever possible. But he had thought about this problem during his walk to the bridge. We can relay the message, he said. There is a human outpost at Kepler Station, only 6 hours away by quantum communication. We can send them the distress signal. Vextor shook his head. The treaty between our species forbids interference in human military affairs. If we relay this message, we could be breaking galactic law. The treaty forbids military interference, Xilex corrected. But this is a humanitarian issue. We are simply passing along a cry for help. The bridge fell silent. Everyone was looking at the commander, waiting for his decision. Xilex could see the conflict in the older alien's eyes. He was a good leader who cared about doing the right thing, but he also had to protect his crew and his station. Sir, said Lieutenant Mordex from the communication station, I am detecting more signals from the New Haven system. Very faint, but they appear to be human emergency beacons. Vextor closed his eyes and took a deep breath. When he opened them again, Xilex could see that he had made his decision. Send the message to Kepler Station, the commander said quietly. Mark it as a humanitarian relay, not a military communication. Xilex felt relief wash over him. Thank you, Commander. Do not thank me yet, Vextor said grimly. We may have just started something that we cannot stop. Lieutenant Mordex worked quickly at his station, encoding the distress signal and preparing it for transmission. The quantum communication array powered up. sending invisible waves through space toward the human outpost. Message sent, Mordex reported. Kepler station should receive it in 37 minutes. Xylex returned to his station and continued monitoring the signals from New Haven. The emergency beacons were getting weaker, and no new transmissions came through. Whatever was happening there, it was getting worse. As the hours passed, the crew of the research station went about their work, but everyone was thinking about the message they had sent. They had all heard stories about human military power. Some said that humans were so dangerous that other species avoided their space entirely. Others claimed that human warships could destroy entire fleets, but these were just stories. None of the Cathari had ever seen humans in battle. They were about to learn that sometimes stories do not tell the whole truth. Sometimes the truth is much more terrifying than any story. 6 hours after they sent the message, Lieutenant Mordex suddenly looked up from his station with wide eyes. "Commander," he said, his voice shaking slightly, "I am detecting massive energy signatures moving toward the New Haven system. Multiple ships, very large, coming from the direction of human space." Vextor stood up and walked to the sensor display. What he saw there made his skin turn even paler than usual. "How many ships?" he asked. "I cannot get an exact count," Mordex replied. "The energy signatures are too powerful." "But sir, there are a lot of them." Silex joined them at the sensor station. The display showed a wall of energy moving through space at incredible speed. "He had never seen anything like it, Doctor," Vextor said quietly. "I believe you may have just summoned something that the galaxy has never seen before." As they watched, the energy signatures continued toward New Haven. Whatever the humans were sending to help their colony, it was massive. And it was moving with the kind of speed that suggested these ships were built for war. Xylex realized that his simple decision to relay a distress signal had just awakened, something that had been sleeping in the depths of human space, something that the galaxy was about to learn was far more powerful than anyone had imagined. The research station continued its orbit around the gas giant, but everything had changed. They were no longer just scientists studying energy patterns. They had become witnesses to the beginning of something that would reshape the balance of power in the galaxy. And it had all started with a dying signal and one alien's decision to help. The sleeping giant awakens Admiral Sarah Chen was drinking her morning coffee when the universe changed forever. She stood on the bridge of the UES Retribution, looking out at the stars through the massive viewing window. Around her, the ship hummed with quiet efficiency. The crew moved through their morning routines, checking systems and preparing for another day of patrol duty in the Outer Rim. Then Lieutenant Commander Walsh burst through the bridge doors, his face white with shock. "Admiral," he said, his voice tight with barely controlled emotion, "we have received an emergency transmission from Kepler Station. New Haven Colony is under attack." Sarah set down her coffee cup with a steady hand, but inside, her heart had begun to race. New Haven was home to over 200,000 people. Many of them were families of veterans who had fought in the brutal Proxima Wars. These were her people. "Show me," she said. The main display screen activated, and suddenly the bridge was filled with the desperate voice of a human colonist. The static and interference could not hide the terror in the transmission. As Sarah listened, her expression grew harder and colder. When the message ended, the bridge was silent. Every crew member had stopped what they were doing to listen. Some of them had friends or family on New Haven. Others simply understood what this meant. "Status of New Haven's defenses?" Sarah asked. Walsh checked his datapad. 3 patrol ships and an orbital defense platform. They were designed to handle pirates and smugglers, not a major attack. Sarah nodded grimly. New Haven was a peaceful colony, far from the dangerous border regions where most human military forces were stationed. It had never needed heavy defenses before. "How long to reach New Haven at maximum speed?" she asked. 14 days, Walsh replied. "Too long." Sarah turned to face her communications officer. "Send an immediate message to Fleet Command. Request authorization for Protocol 7. The communications officer's eyes widened. Protocol 7 was total war footing, the highest level of military alert in human space. It had only been used twice before, both times during the Proxima Wars. "Admiral," Walsh said quietly, "are you sure? Protocol 7 will mobilize every available ship in human space." Sarah looked at him with eyes that had seen too many battles and lost too many friends. "Commander, New Haven has 200,000 civilians. If whatever attacked them is powerful enough to overwhelm human defenses, then it is a threat to every human colony in the galaxy. Yes, I am sure. The message went out through quantum communication channels, racing across human space at faster than light speed. Within minutes, the response came back. Fleet Command had authorized Protocol 7. What happened next had never been seen before in galactic history. Across dozens of star systems, human military bases came alive. Veteran crews who had retired to peaceful jobs were called back to active duty. Ships that had been mothballed for years were pulled out of storage and quickly prepared for battle. Young officers who had only read about the Proxima Wars suddenly found themselves serving alongside legends who had fought in those brutal campaigns. At the massive shipyards of Earth, the great war machines that had been built after the Proxima Wars were awakened. The Apocalypse-class dreadnoughts, each one the size of a small city, powered up their engines for the first time in 5 years. Carrier ships that could launch 1,000 fighters prepared to join the growing fleet. Sarah watched the reports coming in from across human space. The numbers were staggering. 300 ships had been assigned to the relief force, including 12 of the massive dreadnoughts. It was the largest human fleet assembled since the end of the Proxima Wars. But as the fleet gathered, more disturbing news arrived. Long-range sensors had identified the attackers at New Haven. They were called the Velkith Swarm, a species that most of the galaxy thought was just a legend. "Admiral," said Dr. Martinez, the ship's xenobiologist, "according to our databases, the Velkith are a hive-minded species that consumes entire worlds. They attack without warning, strip planets of all resources, and leave nothing behind but dead rock." Sarah studied the information on her screen. The Velkith ships were organic-looking, grown rather than built. They moved in perfect coordination like a swarm of insects. No one knew where they came from or what drove them to attack. "How many worlds have they destroyed?" she asked. "Unknown," Dr. Martinez replied, "but the pattern suggests they have been active for centuries. They attack, consume, and then disappear back into deep space." Sarah felt a cold anger building inside her. These creatures had made a fatal mistake. They had attacked humans and they had killed human civilians. They were about to learn why every other species in the galaxy feared the children of Earth. "Signal the fleet," she ordered. "All ships are to converge on Rally Point Alpha. We jump to New Haven in 6 hours." The next few hours were a blur of activity. Ships arrived at the rally point from across human space. Some came from as far away as the core worlds, having traveled for days at maximum speed. Others came from nearby patrol routes, their crews grim and ready for battle. Sarah watched from the bridge as the fleet assembled around her flagship. She had never seen so many human warships in one place. The sight was both magnificent and terrifying. The veterans among her crew recognized many of the ships. There was the UES Vengeance, which had broken the siege of Proxima Prime, the UES Defiance, which had held the line at the Battle of Centauri Gate, the UES Justice, which had led the final assault that ended the Proxima Wars. These were ships with history, crewed by people who understood the cost of war, but they also understood that some things were worth fighting for. As the final ships arrived, Sarah received a priority message from Fleet Command. Intelligence had confirmed that the Velkith swarm had completely overrun New Haven's orbital defenses. The colony's surface was being systematically attacked, and thousands of people had already been killed or captured. Sarah closed her eyes and took a deep breath. When she opened them again, her expression was set in stone. "All ships," she broadcast to the fleet. "This is Admiral Chen. We are about to face an enemy that believes it can prey upon human civilians without consequence. We are here to prove them wrong. We are here to show them why every other species in this galaxy calls us Deathworlders." She paused, looking out at the assembled fleet. "The Velkith swarm has awakened something that has been sleeping in human space. They have awakened our fury, and they are about to learn that when humans go to war, we do not simply fight. We destroy. We do not simply win. We eliminate the threat completely." The fleet began to move, 300 ships turning as one toward their destination. The jump to New Haven would take them through hyperspace, covering 14 days of normal travel in just a few hours. As the ships prepared to jump, messages flooded in from across human space. Citizens were volunteering to join the military. Retired veterans were requesting to be called back to active duty. The attack on New Haven had awakened something in the human spirit that other species had learned to fear. Sarah stood on the bridge of her flagship, surrounded by the greatest military force humanity had ever assembled. In a few hours, they would arrive at New Haven to face an enemy that had destroyed entire civilizations. The Velkith swarm was about to learn why humans were called Deathworlders. They were about to discover that some sleeping giants should never be awakened. The fleet jumped to hyperspace, and the galaxy would never be the same again. When Deathworlders marched to war, the human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the New Haven system like a storm breaking over a calm sea. Admiral Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the Retribution, staring at the nightmare that had once been a peaceful human colony. The planet that should have been green and blue was now scarred with massive wounds. Strange, organic-looking structures covered parts of the surface like a disease. The orbital stations were gone, replaced by twisted metal and debris floating in space. And everywhere, there were ships. The Velkith swarm vessels filled the space around New Haven like a plague of metal insects. They were not built. They looked grown, with curved surfaces and flowing lines that hurt to look at. Some were small, no bigger than fighters. Others were massive, the size of human cruisers. All of them moved with the same terrifying coordination. "Tactical report," Sarah ordered, her voice calm despite the horror before her. 3,000 enemy vessels detected, replied Commander Torres from the tactical station. They appear to be organized in clusters around key points: the planet, the asteroid mining stations, and the orbital shipyard. Sarah nodded. The swarm had not just attacked New Haven, they had consumed it. The mining stations that had provided the colony with resources were being stripped apart. The shipyard where human vessels had been built was being converted into something alien and wrong. "Any sign of survivors?" she asked. Lieutenant Walsh checked his sensors. "I am detecting human life signs on the planet's surface, concentrated in several underground locations. It looks like some people made it to the emergency shelters." Relief flooded through Sarah, followed immediately by cold determination. There were still people alive down there, people who were counting on her to save them. "Signal the fleet," she ordered. "All ships to battle stations. We are going in." The human fleet spread out as it advanced into the system. The swarm ships detected them immediately and began to move in response. But where the swarm moved like a single organism, the human ships moved like a pack of predators. Sarah watched the tactical display as her captains positioned their ships. These were veterans who had fought in the Proxima Wars, people who understood how to use their ships like weapons. They did not simply fly toward the enemy. They hunted. The first contact came when a cluster of swarm fighters broke away from the main force and streaked toward the human fleet. They moved fast, faster than most species could track. But humans were not most species. The human point defense systems opened fire with deadly precision. Streams of plasma and kinetic rounds reached out to touch the swarm fighters. When the weapons hit, the alien ships simply disappeared in flashes of light and debris. "First blood to us," Torres reported. "No damage to our forces." But Sarah knew this was just the beginning. The real test would come when they engaged the larger swarm vessels. The battle began in earnest when the human dreadnoughts opened fire. The Apocalypse class ships were the most powerful vessels humanity had ever built. Their main guns could crack the surface of a moon. When they fired on the swarm vessels, the results were spectacular and terrible. Beams of pure energy lanced across space, striking the largest swarm ships. The alien vessels tried to evade, but they were too big and the human gunners were too accurate. Where the beams hit, the organic armor of the swarm ships simply vanished, leaving gaping holes that vented atmosphere and alien crew into space. The swarm responded with weapons of their own. Strange, writhing beams of energy reached out from their ships toward the human fleet. When they hit human vessels, they did not simply cause damage. They seemed to try to corrupt and change the metal itself. USS Challenger reports heavy damage, Walsh called out. "Their hull is changing, Admiral. The swarm weapons are doing something to the metal." Sarah felt a chill of fear. These aliens did not just destroy, they consumed and converted. But she pushed the fear aside. Her people were depending on her. "Order the Challenger to fall back for repairs," she said. "All ships maintain distance and use standoff weapons. Do not let those energy beams touch you." The battle spread across the entire system as human ships engaged swarm clusters around each objective. Near the asteroid mining stations, human cruisers played a deadly game of cat and mouse with swarm vessels that tried to use the rocks for cover. Around the orbital shipyard, human carriers launched waves of fighters to clear out the smaller swarm ships. But the hardest fighting was around the planet itself. The swarm had built massive structures on New Haven's surface, organic fortresses that bristled with weapons. As human ships approached the planet, these fortresses opened fire with beams that could reach into orbit. "We need to take out those surface installations," Torres reported. "Our ships cannot get close enough to the planet while they are active." Sarah looked at the tactical display, calculating options. The surface fortresses were too well defended for a ship-based attack. They would need ground forces. "Prepare the drop pods," she ordered. "Signal the marine transports. We are going to take those fortresses the hard way." The human Marines had been waiting for this moment. They were the best trained and best equipped soldiers in human space, veterans of a dozen colonial wars. When the order came to deploy, they responded with grim enthusiasm. Drop pods launched from the human fleet like falling stars. Each pod contained a squad of Marines in powered armor, carrying weapons designed to fight in any environment. As they fell toward New Haven's surface, the pods were protected by shields that deflected the worst of the swarm's defensive fire. The pods hit the ground around the alien fortresses like meteors, and human Marines poured out ready for battle. What they found on the surface of New Haven was a landscape from a nightmare. The swarm had not just conquered the colony, they had begun to change it. Strange organic growths covered the buildings. The very ground seemed to pulse with alien life, and everywhere there were the sounds of machinery that was not quite machine in life, that was not quite alive. The Marines attacked the fortresses with the methodical efficiency that had made human ground forces feared across the galaxy. They used explosives to breach the organic walls, plasma weapons to clear the twisted corridors, and pure human stubbornness to keep fighting when everything around them seemed to be alive and hostile. One by one, the surface fortresses fell silent. With the ground defenses eliminated, the human fleet could move in closer to the planet. They began to systematically destroy the swarm structures that had been built on the surface, using precision strikes to avoid harming the areas where human survivors were hiding. But even as they won victory after victory, Sarah knew that something was wrong. The swarm was not fighting like the tactical reports had suggested. They were adapting too quickly, learning from each engagement and changing their tactics. "Admiral," Dr. Martinez said, appearing at her side with a worried expression, "I have been analyzing the swarm's behavior. They are not just mindless consumers. They are learning from us. Each time we use a tactic, they develop a counter for it." Sarah felt a chill of realization. The swarm was not just dangerous because of their numbers or their weapons. They were dangerous because they could adapt and evolve in real time. "How long before they adapt enough to match us?" she asked. Dr. Martinez hesitated. "At their current rate of learning, perhaps 6 hours." Sarah looked at the tactical display. The battle was going well, but they were nowhere near finished. If the swarm could adapt to human tactics in 6 hours, then the human advantage would disappear. And once that happened, the superior numbers of the swarm would begin to tell. She made a decision that would haunt her for the rest of her life. "Signal all ships," she ordered. "Prepare to deploy quantum disruptors." The bridge fell silent. Every officer knew what quantum disruptors were. Weapons so powerful that they had been banned by galactic law. Weapons that could tear apart the very fabric of space itself. "Admiral," Walsh said quietly, "those weapons will make parts of the system uninhabitable for decades." Sarah looked at him with eyes that had seen too much death. "Commander, if we do not use them, there will be no one left to inhabit this system at all." The order went out to the fleet. Deep in the hulls of the human dreadnoughts, weapons that had been sealed away since the end of the Proxima Wars were prepared for use. The galaxy was about to learn why humans were called Deathworlders, and why some weapons were too terrible to use, except when the alternative was extinction. "The price of mercy," Admiral Sarah Chen hesitated with her finger over the firing control. Around her, the bridge of the Retribution was silent except for the soft hum of life support systems. Every officer was looking at her, waiting for the order that would change everything. Through the viewing window, the battle for New Haven continued to rage. Human ships danced through space, trading fire with the endless swarms of Velkith vessels. But Sarah could see the pattern that Dr. Martinez had warned her about. The enemy was learning, adapting, becoming more dangerous with each passing hour. "Admiral," Commander Walsh said quietly, "we have a communication from the surface. The Marines have found something." Sarah turned toward the communications station. Put it through. The voice that came through the speakers belonged to Colonel Martinez, commander of the ground forces. His tone was tight with barely controlled emotion. Admiral, we have breached the main swarm facility on the southern continent. We found them, ma'am. The missing colonists. Sarah felt her heart skip a beat. How many survivors, Colonel? Approximately 50,000, Admiral. They are alive, but... His voice trailed off. But what, Colonel? Ma'am, the swarm has been using them for experiments. They are trying to understand human biology, human psychology. Some of the prisoners have been changed. Sarah closed her eyes and took a deep breath. When she opened them again, her expression was harder than steel. Can they be moved? She asked. Most of them, yes. But, Admiral, there is something else. The swarm knows we are here to rescue them. They are moving prisoners to other facilities across the planet. If we do not act quickly, they will be lost. Sarah looked at the tactical display. The quantum disruptors were ready to fire. One command from her would eliminate the swarm threat completely. But it would also make large parts of New Haven uninhabitable for generations. 50,000 people were counting on her to save them. But if she used the quantum disruptors, she might kill them all. Colonel, she said, how long do you need to evacuate the prisoners? At least 12 hours, Admiral. Maybe more. And that is assuming the swarm does not interfere. 12 hours. Sarah looked at Dr. Martinez, who shook his head grimly. The swarm would complete their adaptation in 6 hours. After that, the human advantage would be gone. Admiral, Torres called from the tactical station. Sensors are detecting new swarm ships entering the system. A lot of them. Sarah looked at the display and felt her blood turn cold. Hundreds of new swarm vessels were arriving, called by some signal from their forces already in the system. The human fleet was already outnumbered 3-1. With these reinforcements, the odds would become impossible. Time to intercept? She asked. 4 hours, Torres replied. Sarah closed her eyes again. 4 hours until the reinforcements arrived. 6 hours until the swarm completed their adaptation. 12 hours to evacuate the prisoners. The mathematics of the situation were brutal and clear. She was about to give the order to fire the quantum disruptors when another voice came through the communication system. Admiral Chen, this is Captain Rodriguez of the UES Defiance. My ship is badly damaged, but we can still fight. Request permission to take my crew down to the surface and help with the evacuation. Before Sarah could respond, other voices joined in. This is Captain Kim of the UES Vengeance. We volunteered to assist with ground operations. This is Captain O'Brien of the UES Justice. My Marines are ready to deploy. Sarah looked around the bridge and saw something in the eyes of her crew that she had seen before, during the darkest days of the Proxima Wars. It was the look of people who had decided that some things were worth dying for. All ships, she broadcast to the fleet. This is Admiral Chen. I am not going to lie to you about our situation. We are outnumbered and outgunned. The enemy is adapting to our tactics. In a few hours, we will face reinforcements that will make our current problems look easy. She paused, looking out at the stars where her ships were fighting and dying. But there are 50,000 human civilians on the surface of that planet. They are counting on us to bring them home. So we are going to do something that the enemy will not expect. We are going to dig in and fight them for every inch of space, for every minute of time, until we can get our people out. The response from the fleet was immediate and overwhelming. Every ship captain volunteered their crews for the evacuation effort. Marines who had been fighting in space for hours requested to be sent to the surface. Engineers offered to help repair damaged ships so they could continue fighting. Sarah felt tears in her eyes as she listened to the voices of her people. They all knew what this meant. They were choosing to face impossible odds rather than abandon their fellow humans. Very well, she said. All available ships will move to close orbit and provide fire support for the evacuation. Marine forces will establish a perimeter around the prisoner facilities. We hold the line until everyone is safe. The next 12 hours were the longest of Sarah's life. The human fleet moved into close orbit around New Haven, using their ships as mobile fortresses to protect the evacuation efforts. Wave after wave of swarm fighters attacked them, only to be met by walls of defensive fire from human point defense systems. On the surface, human Marines fought a running battle across the continents of New Haven. They moved from facility to facility, breaking down the organic walls that held human prisoners and escorting them to evacuation points. The swarm fought them every step of the way, but human determination proved stronger than alien adaptation. When the swarm reinforcements arrived, the situation became desperate. The new ships were larger and more heavily armed than anything the humans had faced before. They attacked with coordinated precision that pushed the human fleet to its limits. The UES Challenger, already damaged from earlier fighting, took a direct hit from a massive swarm weapon and exploded in a ball of fire. The UES Guardian sacrificed itself to protect a transport full of evacuees, ramming a swarm capital ship and taking it down with them. But the humans held the line. Ship after ship took damage that should have forced them to retreat, but their crews kept fighting. Marines on the surface continued their rescue operations even as swarm forces surrounded them. Transport ships made run after run to the surface, loading refugees and taking them to safety. Sarah stood on the bridge of her flagship, watching her fleet slowly die around her. Half of her ships were damaged or destroyed. Her Marines were running out of ammunition. The swarm was closing in from all sides, but the evacuation was working. "Admiral," Walsh reported. "Colonel Martinez reports that the last group of prisoners has been loaded onto transports. All civilian personnel are accounted for." Sarah felt a weight lift from her shoulders. They had done it. Against impossible odds, they had saved 50,000 lives. "Signal the fleet," she ordered. "All ships are to withdraw to minimum safe distance. Prepare quantum disruptors for firing." The human ships pulled back from the planet, fighting a desperate rearguard action against the pursuing swarm forces. When they reached safe range, Sarah gave the order she had been dreading. Fire. The quantum disruptors unleashed their terrible power on New Haven. The weapons tore holes in space itself, creating zones where the laws of physics simply stopped working. Every swarm ship caught in the effect was instantly destroyed. Their matter scattered across dimensions. The planet's surface was scarred by the weapons, large areas rendered uninhabitable by the quantum effects. But the swarm was gone, eliminated completely from the system. Sarah looked at the ruined world that had once been a peaceful human colony. They had won, but the victory felt hollow. New Haven would never be the same. The quantum disruptors had saved lives, but they had also destroyed a world. "Casualties?" she asked quietly. Walsh checked his reports. 18 ships lost, 43 damaged. 8,000 casualties among fleet personnel. Marine losses are significant, Sarah nodded. The price of victory had been high, but it could have been much higher. 50,000 civilians were alive because of the sacrifice her people had made. As the human fleet prepared to leave the New Haven system, Sarah made a decision that would echo across the galaxy. "Send a message to Fleet Command," she ordered. "The Velkith swarm is to be considered a threat to all sentient life. Any swarm presence detected anywhere in the galaxy is to be eliminated immediately and completely." The message went out through quantum communication channels, spreading to every human outpost and colony. Within hours, human fleets across the galaxy were hunting for any sign of the swarm. The galaxy was about to learn that when humans declared war on something, they did not simply fight it. They hunted it to extinction, and somewhere in the depths of space, other alien civilizations detected the quantum disruptor signatures from New Haven and realized that the sleeping giant of human space had truly awakened. The new galactic order. The human fleet did not go home after New Haven. Admiral Sarah Chen stood in the war room of the UES Retribution, studying star charts that showed swarm activity across 3 sectors of space. Her intelligence officers had been working around the clock, tracking every piece of data they could find about the aliens who had dared to attack human civilians. "Admiral," Commander Torres reported, "long-range sensors have detected swarm signatures in the Kepler system. Multiple ships moving toward the civilian mining station there." Sarah looked at the star chart. Kepler system was not human territory. It belonged to the Altair Republic, a peaceful trading species. But that did not matter to her anymore. "How long to reach Kepler?" she asked. 18 hours at maximum speed, signal the fleet. We are changing course." The human fleet turned away from the path home and headed deeper into alien space. Word of their mission had spread through quantum communication networks, and reinforcements were arriving daily. Ships that had been patrolling other sectors abandoned their posts to join the hunt. The human military had become a single-minded force with one purpose: find every swarm ship in the galaxy and destroy it. Over the next 3 weeks, the human fleet jumped from system to system, following the trail of swarm activity. They arrived at Kepler to find the mining station under attack and destroyed the swarm ships before they could complete their harvest. They followed signals to the Vega system and eliminated a swarm scouting force. They tracked energy signatures to Wolf 359 and found a massive swarm hive ship, which they destroyed with focused fire from their entire fleet. Each battle was swift and brutal. The humans had learned from New Haven, and they no longer gave the swarm time to adapt. They attacked with overwhelming force, using their most powerful weapons from the start. They showed no mercy and took no prisoners. The galaxy watched in fascination and growing fear as reports of human military action spread through diplomatic channels. Species that had been fighting the swarm for years found their systems suddenly cleared of the alien threat. Others discovered that human warships were patrolling their borders without permission, hunting for any sign of swarm activity. On the research station orbiting Velthara, Dr. Xylex monitored the reports with growing unease. His simple decision to relay a distress signal had unleashed something that was reshaping the balance of power in the galaxy. "Doctor," Commander Vextor said, joining him at the monitoring station, "I have received a message from the Galactic Council. They are convening an emergency session to discuss the human military actions." Xylex nodded. He had been expecting this. The major powers of the galaxy were not comfortable with humans taking unilateral military action across multiple sectors. "Have they requested our testimony?" he asked. "Yes. We are to appear before the Council tomorrow." The Galactic Council met on the neutral world of Harmony, a planet that had been specially constructed to serve as a diplomatic center. Representatives from dozens of species gathered in the Great Assembly Hall, their voices raised in debate about the human actions. Dr. Xylex stood at the witness podium, looking out at the assembled delegates. He could see fear in many of their eyes, fear of what humanity had become in the weeks since New Haven. "Dr. Xylex," said Council Speaker Thane, a dignified being from the peaceful Centauri Federation, "you were the first to detect the distress signal from New Haven Colony. Tell us, did you expect your actions to result in the current situation?" Xylex considered his words carefully. "Honored Speaker, I expected the humans to respond to a cry for help. I did not expect them to declare war on an entire species." Murmurs of concern rippled through the assembly. The delegate from the Andromedan Empire, a militant species that had often clashed with human interests, stood to speak. "The humans have violated the territorial sovereignty of 6 different star nations," she declared. "They have deployed weapons banned by galactic law. They refuse to respond to diplomatic protests. This is not a rescue mission. It is conquest." But before anyone could respond, the great doors of the assembly hall opened, and a figure in human military uniform walked in. The hall fell silent as Admiral Sarah Chen approached the speaker's podium. She had not been invited to address the council, but no one moved to stop her. There was something in her bearing that commanded respect and a healthy dose of fear. "Honored delegates," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the hall. "I am Admiral Sarah Chen of the Terran Defense Fleet. I have come to address your concerns about human military actions." Speaker Thane looked uncomfortable, but gestured for her to continue. 3 weeks ago," Sarah said, "the Velkith swarm attacked a human colony and killed thousands of innocent civilians. They tortured prisoners and conducted biological experiments on our people. When we responded, we discovered that this was not an isolated incident. The swarm has been attacking and consuming civilizations across the galaxy for centuries." She paused, looking around the assembly. "We have spent the last 3 weeks eliminating every swarm presence we could find. In that time, we have liberated 17 systems and saved millions of lives. We have broken up swarm fleets that were preparing to attack your worlds. We have destroyed hive ships that had been growing in strength for decades." The Andromedan delegate stood again. "You have done this without permission, without consultation. You have appointed yourselves as the galaxy's police force." Sarah turned to look at her directly. "Tell me, delegate, how many of your people have died to swarm attacks in the last century?" The delegate hesitated. "That is, classified information. Thousands," Sarah said flatly. "We accessed swarm databanks during our raids. They have detailed records of every species they have attacked, every world they have consumed. Your empire has lost 12 colonies to swarm raids in the past 50 years. The Centauri Federation has lost 6. The Altair Republic has lost 3 entire star systems." The hall erupted in shocked voices as delegates realized that their governments had been hiding the true extent of swarm attacks. "Sarah, raised her voice to be heard over the noise. For centuries, you have all known about the swarm threat. You have fought them individually, lost to them repeatedly, and never shared information that might have helped others defend themselves. You have allowed millions to die because you were too proud or too afraid to ask for help. Speaker Thane managed to restore order to the assembly. Admiral Chen, he said, what you say may be true, but that does not give humanity the right to take unilateral military action across the galaxy. Sarah smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Honored Speaker, we are not asking for permission. We are informing you of our intentions. She activated a holographic display that showed star charts of human space and the surrounding regions. As of today, humanity is declaring a protection zone extending 50 light-years from our outermost colonies. Any swarm activity detected in this zone will be eliminated immediately. Any species that harbors or assists the swarm will be considered hostile. The implications of her words sent a shockwave through the assembly. The protection zone would include parts of 6 different star nations, effectively placing them under human military oversight. Furthermore, Sarah continued, we are offering our protection to any species that requests it. Human fleets will patrol your space and eliminate swarm threats. In exchange, we ask only for cooperation in intelligence sharing and military coordination. The delegate from the peaceful Kepler Commonwealth stood to speak. Admiral, what you are proposing is the militarization of half the galaxy. Many of our species have never known war. We do not want to become part of a military alliance. Sarah looked at him with something that might have been sympathy. Delegate, the swarm does not care whether you want war or not. They will come for you eventually. When they do, you will have 2 choices, fight them with our help, or die without it. The assembly hall fell silent as the full weight of her words sank in. The humans were not asking to be part of the galactic community. They were telling the galaxy how things were going to be from now on. Dr. Xilex watched from the witness section as delegate after delegate rose to speak. Some protested the human actions. Others asked for clarification of terms. A few quietly indicated that their governments might be interested in the protection offer. But all of them understood that something fundamental had changed. The humans had revealed military capabilities that far exceeded what anyone had imagined. They had demonstrated a willingness to use those capabilities without hesitation. Most importantly, they had shown that they would not be bound by the diplomatic niceties that governed the rest of the galaxy. As the session ended, Sarah approached the witness section where Dr. Xilex was sitting. Doctor, she said, I wanted to thank you personally. Your decision to relay that distress signal saved 50,000 lives. Xilex looked up at her with his large, thoughtful eyes. Admiral, I fear that my decision may have changed the galaxy forever. Sarah nodded. Yes, it has. The question is whether that change will be for the better. She turned to leave, then paused. Doctor, the swarm is still out there. We have hurt them badly, but they are not extinct. They will adapt, they will rebuild, and they will return. When they do, the galaxy will need to be ready.